Hey guys, my name is KAROLINA GALÁCZ and I indeed am the creative director of DDB Budapest. Thank you for all your time in advance. So I was really happy when I got the invitation to talk to you at this great festival, because the organizers told me that I could pick any topic I want. So I picked one that is really the overarching theme of my career, and that is making the most of your limits, both as a creative and as a client. But that's a strange title, I imagine, because it talks about limits as if they were something that you can use. And I'd like to argue to you today that they absolutely are things that you can use. I think you can turn them into opportunities, and I'd like to show you through examples of my work when that was true for me. Adam Morgan wrote a book that I highly recommend to you. It's called A Beautiful Constraint, and in it he argues that constraints can be a good thing. They are not there to thwart your ambition, but they can be powerful allies. So, yeah, I think I'm not alone with this list. I think usually, and especially at this time, and especially in this region, in these small markets, I think we all struggle with these things. So we lack all these resources, right? So we work with very different deadlines and very different timings than big markets. We work with very, very different budgets. Our talent is leaving our industry or leaving the country even. And many times, our clients' ambitions or our ambitions are not as high as they should be. You know, many times, I think you will all agree with me, a lot of our clients just want the status quo to be intact. They are not really looking for breakthrough ideas. So we should look at this list as resources that we lack, and I hope that by the end of this presentation, I will have changed your mind about these things. Story time. I don't know if you know this one, but it's a good example of how constraints can really be a good thing. In the early days of the Rolling Stones, they had to perform on very tiny stages, because, you know, they were performing in these underground clubs and everything. And so by the time that each musician put their set on the stage, Mick Jagger realized that he really only had a tiny space left to work in. But he wanted the impact, right? He wanted everyone's eyes to be on him, so he invented his crazy dance. So this is an example of how a limit for him, space, forced him to come up with a new way to perform. And that's my point. Limits often drive innovation, but of course, you need to have the right mindset for this. What is the right mindset? I think if you just take one thing from this presentation, it should be that a resource is really not what someone else has allocated to you. It's everything around you. You need to constantly be asking yourself, what can I turn into a resource? And I think that's a new definition of resourcefulness. It's something that you go out and find, or better yet, something that you go out and make. So that's my first point, how to overcome our lack of resources. For an agency, look at everything you have as a resource, and for clients, be a resource. What do I mean? Looking at everything you have as a resource, I think you should think about the creative community you are part of as a resource you can use. Think of all the artists that you know, illustrators, developers, designers, directors, who are hungry for good work, they can be useful to you. Think of all the journalists that you know. They can amplify your work. Maybe they can advise on it. It happened to me many times. These are all resources that you need to think about. And for a client, of course, I don't mean only financially to be a resource, but be a resource with all your expertise. If there is an idea that you believe in or that you think you should believe in, then lean into that, really champion that idea within your organization. Find allies who will champion it with you and try to pull it through your internal processes. Be a resource for this project. And I think this is the first example that I would like to show you. Yeah. So, no, not yet. But it brings me basically to my next point, is to see the opportunity in low budget. And for a client, pay with taking a risk. I think that low budget is not the enemy. I think that it's an opportunity. It's a good one. Because if you don't have the money, but you want the impact, like Mick Jagger didn't have the space, but he wanted the impact, then you need to bridge that gap, and you will be forced to be innovative. You can only bridge that gap with creativity, creative solutions. And what do I mean with pay, with taking a risk? I think that you have to pay somewhere. If it's not the finances, then you will have to pay as a client with the effort that you put in, with the weight that you pull, and with the risk you take. In 2016, there was a theater in Hungary, Katona József Theater, and they just received the news that they were not going to continue getting government funds, which, as an art institution, they heavily relied on. So from one day to the next, they needed to appeal to a whole new base of people. They needed to get new, regular theater goers from somewhere. So they were really a company in real threat and with little to invest, but they were willing to take a risk. So this is what we did. Completely crazy campaign, but of course one of my best memories. Next point, create your own media, and for clients, value relevance over your internal processes. I think that most often if you don't have this big budget, then media will suffer. So if you say, fuck the media budget, let's come up with our own medium, it will already guide you to a very creative place, because you will think of people's attention as not something that you buy, but something that you have to earn. You start thinking about them as an audience, and you start thinking about yourself as someone who has to entertain them, who has to be interesting for them. And for clients, of course, this means a disruption of their internal processes. So the ways that decisions are made in big companies, approval times, approval flows, how the departments work together, they will most probably be disrupted and in these types of projects. So really your North Star as a client should be, how do I make my brand relevant, as opposed to what will happen if we change our internal processes. And the next example that I'd like to show you is one where a movie company came to us and they said that they invested a lot of money in a new movie that they really believed in, but they didn't have any, not so much money for media, so we decided to turn all that money into the production of a thing, another crazy thing. And they wanted to make this movie a cult classic, and I can tell you that now the director is a household name, and people really love this. But let's see how we launch this film.
Magyar filmek? Nem nagyon emlékszem.
Nagyon régen.
Also a little crazy. This was our first client, by the way, and it's 5 years ago, like yesterday, so also a good memory. And that brings me to my next point. For agencies, find your tribe, and for clients, to look for tribes. I guarantee you, if you're a client and you work with a tribe, you will know instantly that you are working with one. What's the difference between a team and a tribe? The difference is that when you walk through the corridor of a creative agency at night, and there's one room lit, and a couple of people are working in it on something that the client has already approved, but they stay and want to make it better, they want to craft it more, that's a tribe. Tribes don't create because they are paid to create, but they create because they want to. They have an inner drive to do something better. You always, always get more out of a tribe than of a team. So I think they are a great resource. The next campaign I want to show you is so fresh that I cannot even show you a video of it because it was done this Sunday for McDonald's. And it's called The Big Deja Vu. And you know, we had the clock change this Sunday. So you had to change the clock back from 3 a.m. to 2 a.m. So basically that hour happened twice. It's a funny twilight zone. And so our idea was that if you can experience an hour twice, then if you come to a McDonald's in this twilight zone, that you can also experience a Big Mac twice. So you got an extra free Big Mac. No video yet, it's coming, but this was done, and most of the things that you see here today were really done with a couple people, production, accounts, creatives, really, really pulling together, putting in the all-nighters because they wanted to make this thing work. So find your tribe. Also, a good thing, I think, is to be more like a journalist for creatives and really value local stories if you're a client. I mean that a good creative is always already like a journalist. They are immersed in what is going on. They know the news, but they also know what happens in their environment, in culture, what do people talk about, what's happening. And if a client understands that a brand can really leverage a local story, then that would really add value to people's lives. So you can be really smart about hijacking a news story or leveraging something that has just happened. Usually you need to be fast with these things and leverage it for your brand. So the next example is something we did for Lego a couple years back, where some people stole statues, and Lego was able to leverage it and turn it into a great brand act. So if you think about it, this is of course also creating your own media, a very good starting point. A tribe really pulling together on this one, thinking low budget, not treating it as something that's an obstacle, but treating it as an opportunity. Something else that, if it becomes a springboard to you, will really lead you to a good place, I think, is for agencies to think of attention as a currency, and for clients to support ideas that are for people and not for your marketing department. We said this to our clients, and I know it's a little harsh, but really we have to admit to ourselves that we often do campaigns for a marketing department, right? What they think will be interesting enough for people versus what really interests people. What I mean is that I don't think that what we do in advertising competes with other ads. I think what we do competes with Game of Thrones and whatever else people are watching. So it's a harsh question to ask yourself whether what we're doing right now is more interesting, or at least as interesting as Game of Thrones. If you think of attention as something that you have to earn, as opposed to something that you can buy, I think that's a very good starting point. So the next example is a Deutsche Telekom one. If you work on telco, then you know this brief very well. It's the coverage brief. It arrives at least once a year, maybe twice, and it says, please communicate that this brand has the best coverage in the country and the network is accessible everywhere. And usually it says, and this brief specifically said, some tactical billboards and an online display campaign, please. But of course, we couldn't do that. It's not what we do at DDB. We thought about attention as something that you have to earn, so we did this.
Pilisánta is a small village in Hungary. Here, with the help of Misi bácsi, János bácsi, Dezső bácsi, and Telecom's 4G, we set out to rethink Easter for the 21st century. We let people relive the Hungarian tradition of sprinkling women, but this time virtually, over the internet. We created an authentic Easter-themed show, which was streamed live thanks to Telecom's nationwide 4G coverage. To direct people to our live stream, we surprised influencers with personalized poems, born from a collaboration with poets Varodani and Latkvi János.
Ne riszálj itt, nekem mint egy csónak. Tartsd a fejed, réttig meglocsollak.
During the live stream, our storytellers shared entertaining anecdotes about Easter traditions from different regions in Hungary to more than 55,000 unique viewers. We received close to 600 poem requests from all over the globe.
Csaba küldi boglárkának Mexikóba, fogadjad szeretettel. Zöld erdőben, fába ütve nagy szeg, meglocsollak, elneher vagy, bezzeg.
700,000 views and 55 pieces of video content later, at least we can be sure of one thing.
Meglocsollak téged, és annyi.
We've created an online library of new and traditional poems to choose from for the next generation of sprinklers.
És mi volt kedden reggel? Meló.
I realized today that these are all Hungarian poems, but they are funny. So, of course, this is also, this was done in an impossible timing, especially for Deutsche Telekom. Like, nothing gets approved in like 1.5 weeks, and this did. And yes, it had a tribe, a couple of crazy guys working, all the time, going to Pilisánta, casting, these old guys. So thinking of attention as something you have to earn. Another good question to ask yourself is, what can we hijack today? And for clients, being more pirate attitude. Of course, I don't mean you should steal from people on boats. What I mean is more breaking rules and creating some new ones. So about this pirate thing, the analogy is that pirates didn't have the infrastructure that the big rich boats had, which were backed, of course, by empires and supported by empires, and they didn't have the training of the navy people on the boats, but they were very effective because they moved and acted like one. They were smart, and they were responsive and dynamic. So I think we can all now think of some client things and some agency processes that we know can be done better, and if we just do them better, then we get to a better outcome. What can we hijack today means you can hijack a piece of news or something that's just happening, like Lego did, or you can hijack a behavior, something that people do. So this next campaign I'd like to show you for the same theater hijacks people's online behavior. also sometimes say to the creatives, if RTL Klub or the biggest TV station in your country doesn't come to shoot at the location that you do your work, then we're not doing a good enough job. And the last point I'd like to make is for an agency to have a little faith in your client and for clients to have a little faith in your agency. This, I think, can go a long way. These are... No. Anyway, so we have some... Yes. So these are billboards that we did for McDonald's that communicate that McDrive is open 24/7. And the way that we solved this was that we didn't, because we presented them in a sketch form, as you do, because these are very hard to do otherwise for a first round of presentation. And the client rejected them actually vehemently and said that they are very boring and they don't want to see that type of thing ever again. So, but we realized that to see from that sketch this outcome, to envision it, you really had to be a creative, because of course I saw it, but I just couldn't explain to the clients how, how nice it would be and how the idea would come off. So we gambled a little bit and we made them ourselves. We paid for them ourselves, these 2 prints. And a couple months later, I presented it to the client again, and the finished product, the absolute finished product, and they bought it right there and then. So, I had a little faith in them. I had the benefit of the doubt for them. And of course, they appreciated that we believed in this so much that we were crazy and did it anyway. I'm not suggesting you do that all the time, but, I think let's break some rules. So have a little faith. I was watching Netflix the other day and believe there is a show on it about glass blowers, these people who, do glass artifacts. And someone said something on this show that I thought was 100% true for advertising. They said, glass breaks, it's what you do next that counts. And I think that's so true. Ideas in this sense, I think, are made of glass. They are very, very vulnerable. They break all the time. So whatever you decide, even if you decide to, leave it broken and come up with something new, or somehow put it back together like we did with the McDrive billboards, what is for sure is that the thing that counts is what you do when your idea breaks or when the process you think would happen breaks down. So really, when there is no way, make one. That's my motto. I kind of work like that every day. I don't really take no for an answer. If I do, it's only temporary, so you shouldn't really trust me on that. If I believe in an idea, I will really, really try with my tribe to make it work. So just going back to the beginning of this presentation, to the slide, I really hope that I was able to change your mind about some of these things. I think you can look at all of this as a great resource that you have right now. Your tribe, you can get much more out of a tribe than a team. Your contacts, everyone you know, who can chip into this project, who can help it. Your clients' ambitions, make your clients ambitious, and then use that team up and use it. Local stories are just there for you to just take and leverage. Created media, and of course, the biggest resource of all, creativity, an infinite one. So choose your agency well. You should have that on your side. Thank you for your time.